Today's class is a very important class because we're going to cover a lot of ground, hopefully even complete chapter 18 and and uh, see and revisit some core concepts. Probably a useful slide. So the core of Vedanta, as you can see them right in the middle of the slide, is the human mind. There are three steps that we have to traverse, or we are traversing, or we will hope to traverse in our lives. The first step is where the mind controls you. You see this line in between called the mind. Think of that as as mind always exists. Without a mind, we will not have life. Imagine if there's no thoughts, emotions, desires, then if there is no subtle body, there will not be a reason for the gross body to exist. So you can never be in gross body and claim there is no subtle body. So the mind exists. Step one is when the mind is one step ahead of you, which is you are controlled by the mind. In other words, that's most of us, isn't it? The instincts and impulses of the mind holds us a slave to it, whether it be at the physical level, how we eat, how we stay fit, our habits, or at the mental level, our emotions, our temper, or our anger, our inferiority, superiority complex. We don't want to be any of that. All of us want to be happy, but it's our mind holding us hostage at the moment. So the line which says you come below the mind, which means the mind is the boss, correct? So that is what we call bondage in Vedanta. In English, to translate, that's what we call bondage. So when people ask you, is life predetermined or is it free will? It's predetermined for 99.99% of us. That doesn't mean life can only be predetermined. Life is beautiful because it's free will. There is no destiny. But destiny, all of that comes in step one. Your destiny is nothing but the portfolio of vasanas that your mind has. And you can see that in others. Somebody you knew 10 years ago continues to get upset for the same things, continue to get happy for the same things. They are in this cyclical wheel of behaviors, predictable patterns of behavior, unfortunately, all through our lives. That is bondage because that's predetermined. Your destiny is that you will get angry, irrespective of whether you do 10-day vipassana and come back or not. So our personality is our destiny. Unfortunately, it is not that. It's not like the alchemist. It's not an adventure. Our personality is our destiny. When you break through our personality and exercise free choice, then we break through our destiny. So bondage is nothing but being bonded or hostage to our mind. Why? Because see where that line you is. It is not a boss of the mind, it is the subordinate of the mind. And there is no intellect, there is no buddhi here. Intellect is that muscle that controls the mind, that makes you stronger than the mind, that allows you to catch the impulses and instincts of the mind and keep it at bay and exercise your correct free will. So when there is no buddhi, it is called buddhu. Buddhu means goof in English. If you Google buddhu meaning, goof. Goof means a foolish person, a person who is a slave, does not realize he's a slave or she is a slave. Buddhu. So most of us are here, though we don't realize it the way I describe it now. We won't call ourselves fools. We won't call ourselves goofs. That's because we are happily ignorant, right? We act at haste and repent at leisure. We act in haste. We give in to our mind. Almost always are swayed between happiness and sadness, swayed between extreme joy when otherwise the world is fine, extreme sadness when there is a pandemic. Uh, we attribute things externally. So when it comes to something where the external world is bad, so we cannot handle it. So we're buddhus. We let our mind dictate our fortunes. This is where the line of control, so to speak, has moved above the mind, which is where you have a grip over your mind. You've established, you've resurrected what we call the intellect. Intellect is, see, intellect and mind, they're all conceptual words and frameworks. In truth, there is no separate muscle in the body or mind called intellect. Intellect is nothing but training the mind to control itself. Uddhared atmanatmanat. We've seen in Bhagavad Gita, which is you alone can save yourself. You have to come to your own help. You have to come to your own rescue through the right insight, knowledge, through the right environment you curate for yourself, through the right text, tuition, teacher, and consistency and shraddha, perseverance. Through that knowledge and environment, you build an intellect which is able to reduce this monster called the mind, and therein you're able to exercise free will. That's why if two people want to represent their countries in the Olympics, it doesn't depend so much about their physical strength. It depends, are you able to put 6 hours of shraddha every day? One person cannot, one person can. That's why Kambli says in an interview, I mean, everybody said Vinod Kambli was as talented or more talented than Sachin. But his mind wanted women and drinks and other things. At the same time, wanted to be a cricketer. It's not that what he did was right, wrong, what Sachin did was right, wrong. It's about his aspiration was as the same as Sachin, but he was in step one. Sachin, fortunately or unfortunately, to the right environment and coaching and upbringing and his own passion, could do what it takes to be a good cricketer. You see the difference. Difference is free will and bondage. Is not whether the world is, the life itself is bondage or free will. It depends on which side of the line called the mind you are in. If you are in control of the mind, which is you've established an intellect that holds your impulses and instincts of your mind, then that those activities you exhibit free will. So, so we start by exhibiting free will in certain activities of our life. Some people are very objective at work. They don't get emotional at work. They see things as they are, but they're very emotional with family. Something happens to your children, that's it. You lose that objectivity. But people who have established intellect across all dimensions of life, who've understood the mind for what it is and control over it, they are called uh, they can live life free will, and that's called buddhi, not buddhu anymore, because buddhi means intellect, buddhu means mind, only the mind. My mother, um, her WBC level, white blood cells level, is less than 2000 usually, and the minimum count for normalcy is 4000, isn't it? 4000 to 11,000 is the WBC normal count, and it's good to be in between 6,000 and 10,000. So her average on a good day, her count is usually two and a half thousand. It's and it's got her into trouble of no fault of hers. It's just the WBC count. So even in her 30s, when she was young, she's got into health problems. Uddhared atmanatmanat, nothing the medical world can do. So she has to take charge. So for the last 30 years, 35 years that I know her, she's never missed physical exercise one day, rain or shine. She's never gotten into any temptation of food which is not good for her. Recently, she gave up even lactose, I mean, milk products. but she doesn't see a big torture or sacrifice in that. She she doesn't think that she's living an average life because she doesn't eat half the things that you and I may want to eat. She does 1.5 hours of physical exercise routine every day. And that pays her huge dividends. She's probably gets less sick than the average person, though she is probably the candidate who can get more sick than the average person. But it's she does all of that without making a fit about it. Why? Because what we see as a big sacrifice, she doesn't. Because comes from the intellect. It comes doesn't come from restraining the mind for one time. Then every time you have to restrain it. If you've established the why, which is established the intellect, you're in control of the mind. So that's free will. See, that's free will. I want to live my life healthy is free will. Our goal is also that, but we live in bondage. So we want it, but we find it impossible to. Like example of my mother, she wanted it, but that requires free will. If you have to choose the consequence, you don't have choice over the action. If you want to do what you want to do now, you lose choice of where you will be in future. But if you want to be somewhere in the future, you lose choice of what you can and cannot do now. So for people in step 1, losing control over what I can and cannot do today seems like sacrifice. For people in step 2, losing control over what I can be and cannot be tomorrow, that seems like a big sacrifice. So people in step 1 want freedom today. I will do what I want to do. People in step 2 are okay to sacrifice freedom today, saying, I will do what I need to do. Why? Because I want freedom in the consequence to be who I want to be. I want to be a happy and peaceful person, Aditya. I truly do. Tell me, what can I do? I've studied so many books and self-help books, but I'm not able to be happy and peaceful. You're, that's because you're right. You want freedom there in the consequence. I want to become happy and peaceful. But if that's the consequence, today's actions are limited. You cannot give into your mind whims and fancies of the mind as well as want freedom in the consequence. To have freedom in consequence, your choices today are restrained. That the choices today need to be how you invest time. Where do you invest effort? What do you do weekends? So that's step 2. But Vedanta doesn't stop with step 2. The reason I'm saying this is telling us why Vedanta is in its essence the study of the mind, because the mind is the common element across all stages of Vedantic study. Step 3 is going beyond the intellect. It's called Buddha. Buddhu, Buddhi, Buddha. Buddha is a person who's not attached to the intellect as well. He is transcended, or she has transcended the intellect. Buddha is saying, what is there to control when I'm not the mind? The mind is the persona. Personality is derived from the word persona. Persona in its original form is a mask. So when we say, what's your personality? If you go to the root of the word, we're asking, what's the mask you're wearing now? It's the word persona comes from stage play. When people act on stage, they used to wear a mask to depict the character they are playing. That mask is called persona. Not the person who's wearing is not the. So your personality is the mask you wear, according to even the English definition of the word personality. So the mask you wear now is nothing but the portfolio of your mind. As simple as that, isn't it? So Aditya's mask is the series of buttons Aditya has punched in the past leads to the personality, which is the baggage he is carrying. Your personality is your mask. Another person's, your boss's personality is his mask. But that doesn't mean you are that. The fact that I'm not you and you're not me shows that you are not you and I'm not me. I'm not trying to sound like Nityananda here. What I'm saying is, how can the self be just Kriti alone and her personality? How can the self be Jay alone and his personality? How can the self be Aditya alone? The fact that I think I am just me, but I also see you're different shows that I cannot just be me. Anyway, so the step 3 is you're not the mind. And that's the stage called Buddha, where you don't need an intellect to control the mind. So you are able to transcend the intellect. That's where you throw both the thorns. So step 1 is where the thorn of desire has pricked you. Step 2 is where you have to bring in a thorn called the intellect to pick this one out. But you're holding on to that thorn called intellect. Why? Because you keep needing it, right? You have to keep plucking the mind out. Step 3 is you're throwing out both the thorns, because a thorn is still a thorn. Good thorn, sattva is also a thorn, rajas is also a thorn, tamas is also a thorn. If you're neither, you are the self in you. You don't need thorns. So that's called liberation. That's called Buddha. So across these three, it's the mind that we are playing with. The mind in control of us, we in control of the mind. Then there is nothing to control, because you're not the mind. You've sidestepped the mind. Let the mind do its bidding. Why would I bother? I've sidestepped the mind. My mind is angry. Doesn't mean I need to take suffering. My mind is happy. Doesn't mean I have to go to ecstasy. I observe the mind suffering. I observe the mind being happy. Why am I suffering? Because my body is paining. Of course, I can feel the pain. It's not that when you're self-realized, you don't feel your own body's pain. But you're not the body. So you are able to see your body's pain passively instead of creating a fit. It's paining, it's paining, it's paining. It's paining, but you're not suffering because of that. We can't understand that difference. When Ramakrishna had throat cancer and people said it must be excruciating, how are you still smiling, Swami? He says, of course it's paining for me, but I can observe the pain. I'm not suffering, but I can observe the pain. But it doesn't make me suffer. I'm not the mind. I'm not the mind. I'm not the body. I am that self, the ancient, eternal self in me, masquerading as the body. So this slide covers all of Vedanta, all 18 chapters of the Gita. Now, what we're going to do now is get into the slokas of the Gita, the remaining slokas. Keep this in mind, though, as we cover this. Oops. Oh, the pictures came in a little late. So, I mean, nothing much. The step 1 and 2 is just where the baggage lies, right? The step 1 is where you're carrying the burden of your personality. Intellect is nothing but a smarter way of doing things. So the wheels in this bag is the intellect carrying the same load, but you are in control of it. The bag goes where the wheels take it instead of you walking where the burden takes you. Step 3 is where is the bag to carry, first of all? I'm creating a bag and I'm trying to be smart about it. There's no bag to carry. So that's step 3. So we found that in order to move from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, we saw that the Gita very, very beautifully classifies step 1 itself into 3 parts. It says, for you to move from step 1 to step 2, see, the Gita is not just descriptive, it's also prescriptive. Meaning, what's the point of just describing something beautifully if it doesn't give you an action plan to get there? So whenever I meet clients as well, I keep asking them, you've created a good strategy for your organization. It's descriptive, but how are you going to get there? What's the prescribed next steps? So if someone tells you leadership is knowing the way, showing the way, going the way, you said, good, that's a great description, but I'm paying you money to create that change in my organization. What's the prescription for us to get there? Then a lot of consultants would be like, I don't know. I've just read books that describe leadership. If you ask me how to change the culture of your organization, I don't know. So similarly, you're the self, good, but how to get there? So the last 3 weeks, we've invested time. We're not going to repeat that now. We're going to move forward. But the first comes with assessment of how big is this bag that is controlling you. If the bag is too big, then you don't even know there is a better way out, because you're so focused on the burden. How can you even think about going elsewhere? So you don't even realize there is a better way out. That is called tamas. Tamas is where the personality load that we carry is so much. It has become our reality. And whether we want it or not, we cannot get out of it because we are busy carrying that load. When the load is medium, it's called rajas. That is, we are passionate and got attached to that load. In certain parts of our life, we are able to enjoy it. In certain parts of our life, we realize it's a burden. When the load is light, we call it sattva. You are in control of that load. That's the wheeler example here. You are in control of that load. So you're able to use the load to your advantage. Load is joy, right? The load is the world, basically. The load is your desire. In control of the desire, life is great because you can leverage the world to your advantage. The world is to have fun. The world is to enjoy. The problem, load is big. When the world enjoys you, you don't enjoy the world. The load is small. You pick the right things to enjoy. You enjoy your body, enjoy your mind. So that's why Krishna, in a series of verses, has told us so far about knowledge. What is knowledge of sattva, rajas, and tamas? What is the right action with respect to sattva, rajas, and tamas? How does the performer, the doer, the ego differ between a sattvic mind, rajasic mind, and tamasic mind? Then we saw what is intellect what is sattvic intellect, which is the aim that we want to reach, is sattva in all of these qualities. What is rajasic intellect? What is tamasic intellect? Then Krishna talks about determination, persistence, and shraddha. What is sattvic steadfastness? What is rajasic steadfastness and tamasic steadfastness? And finally, in this slide, he talks about happiness. Sorry, he doesn't use slides, but in these verses, he talks about sattvic happiness, rajasic happiness, and tamasic happiness. And that's where we are at around sloka 40. So, big discernment. Krishna talks about knowledge, action, doer, intellect, persistence, happiness. How all of these differs basis the load that you carry. Tamasic happiness usually stems from laziness, sleep, indolence, negligence, and aversion to life itself. Rajasic happiness, when the desires are active, it stems from the contact of sense objects. It stems from progress, achievement, passion, and the mind's impulses. In Rajas, as 38 says here, Rajasic happiness is happiness that seems like nectar at first and poison later. Imagine the clarity and the intensity with which he's saying. And Sattvic happiness is the opposite. It tastes like nectar in the end, but it seems like poison first. And that's what we saw with the bag example, isn't it? Or the mind example. Where do you want to exercise freedom? Sattvic happiness is often is freedom of consequence. Nectar then seems like poison today. It's actually not poison. Like, for example, if you and I want to be fit, it seems like schedule required for that is poison. But for my mother, who that in that example, that schedule is not poison, it's nectar, nectar both sides. The joy is in the schedule, and the output is also beautiful. So it's nectar both sides. But this sloka comes from an angle of rajasic person pursuing sattvic happiness seems like restraint today, but in that restraint is freedom tomorrow. But if we are not able to calculate that cause and effect relationship, we cannot put in restraint today. And that is rajasic happiness. That is also happiness, but that's rajasic happiness, which is short lived, which is I will give in to my desires today. Nectar today, because it's fun. You want to do something, just go do it. It's fun. Anything that seems like restraint today, but freedom tomorrow is sattvic happiness. The opposite is rajasic happiness. So all of this is just dissection. Now comes the important part, the next bit of the Gita, the chapter 18. And pay attention here, because this is the tricky bit which is often confused. Now, the automatic question here at this point is, Aditya, all of these 6-7 attributes, happiness, steadfastness, which is sadhana or shraddha, doer, action, knowledge, I understand all of these can be at 3 levels. Sattvic level is the most beautiful, subtle level of all of this, action or knowledge or happiness, and tamas, rajas. But I'm already wired a certain way. I'm already wired a certain way. What activities must I embark to help me get out of it? At the same time, be honest to who I am. Some people love reading and studying, and some people are naturally equipoised. I am not. If I try to be like them, that seems fake. What can I do to extinguish my own ego and desires, considering I'm not all sattva yet? And that's where the controversial today, but not controversial at all, verses start. Remember, chapter 18 is the summary of all of Gita. So even before we created epilogues and summary books, Krishna's summary of chapter 18 touches upon every chapter that we have seen so far. So all of these you would have seen in some chapter or the other. Krishna says now, pivots into the further categorization. So on 40, he concludes saying, no living thing, therefore, Arjuna, in this material realm is free from the influence of these 3 modes of nature, which is Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas. 41. The duties of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras are distributed according to their qualities, in accordance to the combination of these 3 gunas that they have. Now, what are Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras? As personas or archetypes, basis the combination. It's data analytics, basically. See, you categorize data first, isn't it? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas is categorization. And then you see your use case. What combination of these 3 buckets is your use case, which is your personality? Okay, somebody is more sattvic, somebody is more rajasic. So that archetypes basis level 2 categorization is this. So Brahmins means certain composition of sattva, rajas, tamas. Let's bucket it as Brahmin. Kshatriya is certain composition, Vaishya, Shudras. And this got nothing to do with which mummy daddy you were born to or which caste you were born in. It's got to do with the baggage that you have inherited because of your own past. It's got nothing to do with man or woman. It's got nothing to do with the color of your skin. It's got nothing to do with where you were born. uh, Many priests in temples are there because and don't want to be there. When they see a Mercedes Benz come in, they're jealous why God has made me poor. So just because you're born into a Brahmin family, you may be still be a Shudra, sir. Just because you're born in a Shudra family, you may still be a Brahmin, sir. It's got nothing to do with the caste of birth. But but don't dismiss it so easily. There is something in it if you look at it without the lens of bias. There's something very important in it, which could be the bridge between knowing all these things and you experience that bliss in your own life. Let's see what these are and what is Krishna's prescription to us. 42. If tranquility, restraint, austerity, purity, patience, integrity, knowledge, wisdom, belief, these are the intrinsic qualities of work for Brahmins. What kind of professions and actions generally require purity, patience, knowledge, wisdom? Very few worldly professions be limited to these qualities. And therefore, the role of Brahmins usually they are at their best. They are at their best because their composition of gunas lends itself to tranquility, restraint, austerity, purity. If they have to do something else, they have to become somebody who they are not. And therefore, the prescribed profession for these people are things that relate to knowledge, things that relate to inquiry, things that relate to reflection, contemplation, and meditation. It can also be scientific inquiry. It need not just be Vedantic inquiry, because that requires knowledge and wisdom, that requires independent thought and thinking. So, anything in the realm of knowledge, anything in the realm of uh, purity, is a natural disposition and quality and profession for Brahmins. And that could be anybody who, through their own past karma, has inherited a more sattvic dominant guna. So naturally, they are at their best when they are in those professions. Valor, strength, fortitude, skill in weaponry. Weaponry because many thousands of years ago, but skill in any kind of art or skill. Resolve never to retreat from battle, large heartedness in charity, and leadership qualities. These are natural qualities of the work of Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas are Rajasic, but Rajas followed by Sattva. When you're in the middle, you have to ask what is after that. So, Rajas, is it Rajas Tamas or Rajas Sattva? Kshatriyas are Rajas Sattva. So, they have the good qualities of Sattva, but predominated by Rajas. So, the Sattva serves the Rajasic instincts, which is great. So, they're very good leaders. You need to be passionate to be a leader, no? I mean, why do you have to be a leader if you don't have a desire for that? But Rajasic people have desires, but the desires is well subjected. So they naturally become leaders of men, leaders of women. They are supposed to be large-hearted in charity. If you see, each word here is Rajasic, worldly, but Sattvic Rajas, which is for the help of other people. Resolve to never retreat from battle, which means they don't keep doubting themselves because they enter battle only to for a larger good, either to protect their people. It is either to keep dharma. See, we can always say that end of the day, killing people is wrong. It is wrong. All of us know that. It doesn't take an Einstein to say killing people is wrong. But the thing with battle, not just battle in the field, generally politics, I'm saying. These days, you don't find 5,000 men both sides coming in. Well, unfortunately, it's like that in Gaza at the moment, where there is also, I saw a few hours ago, the ground force has also been invoked, and it could be a greater mess. But resolve never to retreat in battle means I don't like killing personally as my swadharma. As a Kshatriya, I can't run away. Why? Because because I have 500,000 people whom I've taken responsibility for. So if someone is coming and beating them up, I have to protect these 500,000 people. Correct? However, how to act in that battle, there is a big science to it. But the point is, Kshatriyas never cringe towards their duty. You can already start seeing where we are getting to, isn't it? If Kshatriya by profession becomes what a Brahmin should do, what happens to that Kshatriya, sir? Frustration. Sees, could even see Brahmins as hypocrites. He cannot sit down. He has to go act, and you see the world and you see the world suffering. A Kshatriya cannot sit down and meditate. A Kshatriya says, what the hell is all this? We need to go act, build hospitals, build schools, save the world. Vivekananda said, the problem with India is that everybody, no, none of us are Brahmins by nature, but we all do Brahminical activities. So who's there to build society? Who's there to raise the living standards of the country? That require Kshatriya ability. At the same time, if Brahmins try to become Kshatriyas, it's difficult. They will go back to their intrinsic nature. Agriculture, dairy farming, and commerce, trade, business are the natural works for those with qualities of Vaishyas. Vaishyas are Rajas followed by Tamas broadly, approximately, which means they're also serving the world because they're Rajasic, but it's a little more selfish than Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas are supposed to be living for others. Vaishyas are traders, merchants. Merchants are always supposed to be a little selfish and cunning and tricksters. But they're also serving. They're practicing commerce. They are the S&P 500, Sensex and Nifties are all run by corporations and organizations who are supposedly run by Vaishyas if it has to be run well. Vaishyas are great merchants and great business people. It's natural to them. Not the people running the show today. I'm saying you and I may be a Vaishya depending on our natural disposition. And the final thing is serving through work is the natural duty for those with the qualities of Shudras. Shudras, because of the burden they carry and the ignorance they are in, it's difficult to stand up with the leadership skills. You see that not everybody has leadership skills, isn't it? In your own organization, do every person who's assigned as a manager, do they all have equal leadership skills, sir? No. Why? Because of their personalities. Some people are more attractive as a leader. Some people are just not attractive as a leader of no fault of theirs. None of them wake up one morning not wanting to be a leader. You and I want to be leaders, but unfortunately, it's a respect that needs to be earned. It's not something we want. Therefore, some people are more Kshatriyas are natural leaders. So if you see a leader that you're attracted to, he's a Kshatriya in nature, by nature. They have natural leadership skills. Now, similarly, if you see a person who's a great businessman, not probably a leader or not, but a great businessman, an astute mind for commerce, or even astute mind for any trade, be it agriculture, be it selling soap, or be it Google, or inventing Bitcoin. It's all Vaishyas. Shudra is the nature where tamas is predominant. When tamas is predominant, we have seen tamas is like the embryo inside the womb. You cannot simply take the child out of the womb. It needs 10 months for the child to grow to a certain state, and then only you can give birth. And therefore, for a Shudra, the natural skill, natural qualities, natural profession is serving through work. Be of assistance, serve through work. Now, it can be wrongly interpreted today. Serving through work is serving a Vaishya, serving a Kshatriya, serving a Brahmin. No. Serving through work means you can only do work that seems menial in nature, because it doesn't come in the buckets of Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishyas. If a Shudra does commerce or trade, most probably tamas will take over and the business will suffer. If the Shudra is put in a leadership role, most commonly they'll be unattractive leaders because they're selfish in nature, or indolent, or lazy, cannot take decisions when it should be taken, where it should be taken, how it should be taken. How can you be a Kshatriya? Shudras can't be Brahmins because they don't, it is not attractive. If it's so attractive, tranquility, restraint, austerity is so easy. All of us can easily, by this time, in 1 year into Vedanta, 1 year into Gita, we'd all be self-realized, isn't it? We're not, because we're not completely there. So there's nothing wrong or right being a Shudra. It is just that our own making has made us into a Shudra. So Krishna says, don't worry. Why is he saying don't worry? Because the beauty here, unlike Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva, where the road to direction of travel is from Tamas to Sattva, here the direction of travel is not Shudra to Vaishya to Kshatriya to Brahmin. There is no superior, inferior here. It is just different duties born out of different portfolios of vasanas. Full stop. So Krishna says in the next sloka, and this is where the beautiful slokas start, by fulfilling their own duties, born of their own innate qualities, human beings can attain perfection. Hear each word carefully here. By fulfilling their duties, born of their own innate qualities, human beings can attain perfection. Now hear from me, Arjuna. How can one become perfect? By discharging one's prescribed duties. This is the point we fail to catch when we talk about Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. The first misinterpretation is we assume it's caste based and discriminatory. It is discriminatory if you see it as a luxury of birth, which is a unfortunate. See, the problem is most so-called Brahmins out of caste are not Brahmins, right? They're Shudras or Vaishyas or Kshatriyas, because you are born out of your parents, but you are that. We've seen many types of causes. Material causes is a sex of a man and woman creates a child, but the cause of your birth is your vasanas, your karma. Got nothing to do with parents. Definitely by birth being restricted to menial work, they're jewels and they shine through because they are Kshatriyas. They become leaders of their clan, or they are Brahmins because they are really good in their profession in terms of knowledge and wisdom. So Krishna says, whatever your innate qualities is, not where you were born, whatever your innate qualities is, human beings can attain perfection by doing those duties. So if you are pushed into doing Brahminical duties, however And if you're born in a so-called, by what the world terms, a Brahmin family, but in your heart of heart, you are a Kshatriya, you want to go out there and be of service to the world through leadership positions, you will be a very bad Brahmin, sir. You can attain perfection only by going out there and rolling up your sleeves and being of service to the world, by being protector of people, by getting into, say, politics, or getting into any leadership position, or starting, uh, you know, showing your valor, fighting the right causes, being an actor. That is your mode to perfection. If you are a trader, that is your mode to perfection. How? 46. By performing one's natural occupation, one worships the Creator from whom all entities have come into being, and by whom the whole universe is pervaded. By such performance of work, a person easily attains perfection. Very important sloka, 47. It is better to do one's own dharma, even though imperfectly, than do another's dharma, even though perfectly. By doing one's innate duties, a person does not incur sin. It is better to do one's own dharma, even though imperfectly, than to do somebody else's dharma. That is the core of all of Gita, where Krishna says, Arjuna, your innate qualities is that of a Kshatriya. Even if you run away from war, you'll find it coming back to your doorstep, because that is your nature. If you see injustice somewhere, you will go towards it to establish justice. You may run away from this war because of momentary pleasure of seeing your aunt and uncle there. It is in your nature to resurrect good over evil. You are a Kshatriya. Okay, you don't fight this war. Tomorrow, because of this, you not fighting this war, if there is more injustice in the world, you will naturally go fight that war. So what you're running away from is a mirage. You are a Kshatriya. It is better to do that dharma, even though imperfectly, meaning there is always some sin involved in all of these. Remember, all of these are thorns. None of this is the truth. Than be a fake Brahmin, Arjuna. You think that you want to go sit meditate now, but you cannot. You sit down and meditate. In your eyes, what is happening? Poor people suffering. In your mind, what is running through? You're not protecting the world. So get out, take your accessories, go out there, protect the world. How you do that is, we'll come to it next. It is better to do your own dharma, swadharma, varnashrama dharma. Varna is these four. Ashrama is the stage of life you're in. The matrix between varna and ashrama is called varnashrama dharma. And that determines what your dharma is. Do that even though imperfectly. Even though you may not be. That's why you find a lot of people who like public speaking are not great public speakers. This is just an example I'm giving. They find more joy in doing that imperfectly than doing software programming perfectly, though they're very good at it. Because they, heart in heart, don't want to be in TCS. They want to be stand-up comedians. They want to be journalists. They're not great journalists, but they find a lot of joy. It's okay to do that imperfectly. They get more rewarded at the end of the day. They feel more alive at the end of the day than a person who's great at coding but doesn't want to code. Similarly is this. By doing one's innate duties, one does not incur sin. A Kshatriya protecting his country does not incur sin as long as he is true to himself. One should not abandon duties born of one's nature. even if one sees defects in them, Arjuna. Indeed, all endeavors are veiled by some evil, just as fire is by smoke. The duties born out of your nature, you should go with it. All the fact that you're in the world means there is some evil. Just as fire is by smoke. That's the sattva metaphor. So, what he's saying is even the best of duties, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, even knowledge, there is some evil in it. It's not the truth, it's still ignorance. The self alone is the truth. So even the best of endeavors, sattva, is also fire, is also the smoke that is covering the fire. Rajas is the dust that is covering the mirror, and tamas is the embryo inside the womb. It is different intensity of veils or ignorance, but it is still ignorance. So don't be a hypocrite. Whatever you are, do it. Obviously, there will be evil involved in it. 49. Those, now we are moving into we've covered personality, mind, sattva, rajas, tamas, applications of it, and now we've covered varnas and professions. Now Krishna starts summarizing the part of the Gita where he goes into the level 2, which is, once we have now covered how to elevate experience in life by being true to your dharma, now let's look at the higher purpose of life. 49. Those whose intellect is unattached everywhere, who have mastered the mind and are free from desires by the practice of renunciation, attain highest perfection of freedom from action. So the segue here is, in order to practice renunciation, you must first act according to your dharma. If you have discharged your duties well, is when you can sleep well. And Arjuna, a Kshatriya by nature, cannot renounce his Kshatriya tendencies and go to a cave and start meditating. He needs to first play in his field, which is a Kshatriya. It is only when he has become a leader can he feel free of that desire. Otherwise, it's frustration. He's meditating but thinking of guilt of not protecting people or not helping poverty. A Brahmin may not feel guilty of that. Nothing right or wrong, because their desires are different. Their desires is self-knowledge. It's not that they like poverty. That is not making them guilty. So what he's saying is, for your intellect to be unattached and for you to master your mind, first start with your swadharma and discharge your swadharma in a way that you're not aggravating those desires, you're dispensing those desires. And as you dispense the desires, firstly required birth, then you're automatically, slowly becoming a lesser and lesser Kshatriya. A Brahmin becomes lesser and lesser Brahmin. A Vaishya becomes lesser and lesser need for Vaishya. A Shudra becomes lesser and lesser need for Shudra. And you start renunciating. So you may be a Kshatriya. Once you have dispensed that desire of Kshatriya, then Arjuna, you don't need to fight battles. That's why at the end of Mahabharata, all of them leave their possessions, leave their kingdom, and go towards sannyasa, renunciation. And that can happen only if they have dispensed their desire of a Kshatriya. Hear from me, Arjuna, and I shall explain how one who has attained perfection, which is the person who has renounced actions, where we are now. But renouncing actions for what? For attaining Brahman by being firmly fixed in the transcendental knowledge. This is the highest knowledge. 51 to 53 I've combined here. One becomes fit to attain Brahman when he or she possesses a purified intellect and firmly restrains the senses, abandons objects of the senses, casting aside attraction and aversion. Such a person relishes solitude, eats lightly, controls the body, mind, and speech, is ever engaged in meditation, practices dispassion, free from egoism, violence, arrogance, desire, possessiveness of property, and selfishness. Such a person, situated in tranquility, is fit for union with the Brahman. How do we get to this stage, sir? By reading the last 20 slokas again. Not now, but in our own time. Enter a field that speaks to you, not speaks to your desires, but speaks to the portfolio of vasanas that you are. In that alone, you can achieve perfection. Not everybody needs to go to caves in the Himalayas, unless that's your swadharma. The path of least resistance, the title I gave to today's class. The path of least resistance is the path that is natural to you. But the way you dispense those actions in that profession should be to eradicate the desires that firstly required that profession, not to aggravate desires. And as you dispense those desires, your need to be a Kshatriya, the need to be a Vaishya, all reduces. And you start renunciating actions. And once you renounce actions, your life becomes simple. It becomes a MVP. The startup world, we call it minimum viable product. What is the minimum viable life that you need to lead and be happy? In that minimum viable life, higher questions come in. The truth and Brahman. 54. The one situated in the transcendental Brahman realization becomes mentally serene, neither grieving nor desiring. What is that to grieve? So when Arjuna, Krishna says, you have not dispensed your desires, Arjuna. So now if you sit silent, you will be grieving that you're not protecting the world, you're not fighting the right battle. You dispense your desires and then sit, then you won't be grieving. That is why I'm asking you to fight. See, if Krishna doesn't fight that war, he's not going to grieve. If Arjuna doesn't fight that war, he will grieve because he's a Kshatriya. So a person situated in Brahman becomes serene, neither grieving nor desiring. What is there to grieve or desire? Being equitably disposed towards all living beings. Such a yogi attains supreme devotion unto me. Now we go into bhakti. 55. Only by loving devotion to me, Arjuna, does one come to know who I am in truth. It is not an intellectual process. You have to dispense your desires, and in that quietude, you have to give in completely to the self in you. Then, having come to know me, my devotee enters into full consciousness of me. My devotees, though performing all kinds of actions in the world, in reality take full refuge in me. By my grace, they attain the eternal and imperishable abode, which is self-realization, which is understanding that in and through all of this natak, from the beginning to the end, I am, and I am only the self in me. Everything else is an object of experience, which is not my concern. It's not me. I service it to the best of ability, but I don't take joy or suffering through it. And in that inability to take joy and suffering is a lot of bliss. Dedicate your every activity to me, the knowledge, making me a supreme goal. Take shelter of the yoga of the intellect, Arjuna, discrimination, discernment. Keep your consciousness absorbed in me always. You see, whatever covers your mind fully, you find you always talk about it, like kids who read Harry Potter only talk about Harry Potter all the time. In the lunch table with parents, they bore the parents to death. If you have kids who just reading Harry Potter, I have a few friends whose kids do that. What did Dumbledore tell Harry Potter? It's always curious. Sir, that absorption should be in the self. That's what Krishna is saying. When you're at office doing office work, you're still doing it with a substratum of thinking about the self. When you talk to people, you talk only about the beauty, the exhilaration of the self. People had fewer things to talk about. When wise people get together, they talk just about Vedanta, they talk about the self. When they're alone, they think about the self. They take shelter and give in fully into the self. That is the condition of a yogi. If you remember me always, by my grace you will overcome all obstacles and difficulties. But if, due to pride, you do not listen to me, you will perish, Arjuna. You'll get into samsara again and again. Be careful. For example, if motivated by pride, Arjuna, you think, I shall not fight, your decision will be in vain. Why? Your own material nature, which is Kshatriya, will compel you to fight again and again. If not this war, you can't run away from being a Kshatriya. You will take great grievance in injustice in the world. Oh Arjuna, that action which out of delusion you do not wish to do, you will be driven to do it by your own inclination, born out of your own material nature. What are you running away from? The self dwells in the heart of all living beings, Arjuna. According to their own karmas, it directs the wandering of the souls who are seated on a machine made of material energy. 62. Surrender exclusively unto him with your whole being, Arjuna. By his grace, you will attain perfect peace and the eternal abode. Thus is always a special word in the Gita. Thus is always Krishna saying he has covered a particular part. Thus I have explained to you this knowledge that is more secret than all secrets. Raja Rahasya. Ponder over it deeply, then do as you wish. Here again my supreme instruction, the most confidential of all knowledge. I'm revealing it for your benefit, Arjuna, because you are very dear to me. Always think of me, be devoted to me, worship me, and offer obedience to me. Doing so, you will certainly come to me. This is my pledge to you, my sovereign guarantee to you, for you are very dear to me. So we have a minute left. We're just going to read 2 or 3 more slokas and then pause. We're nearly at the end of the Gita. Abandon all varieties of dharmas. He is contradicting himself. He's saying abandon Brahman, Satriya, Vaishya, Sattva, Tamas, Rajas. All are thorns. Once you pluck your thorn, throw both the thorns. There is no dharma that is the right dharma. Dharma is the bluff. If you are too invested in dharma, you've again lost the plot. Abandon all varieties of dharmas and just surrender to me. In that surrender is peace. Don't run behind dharmas. Not for us today, but where Krishna is speaking about now. At the end of the day, all dharmas are masks and personalities. Just simply surrender to me alone. Vanquish your ego and I shall liberate you from all sins. It's a good time to end with 67 and 68. Why? Unlike most religions, most philosophies, including Hinduism, not just others, the modern ideology seems to take a mic and microphone and convert more people to it. But Vedanta is saying, please don't spread it. Why? This instruction should never be explained to those who are not austere or to those who are not devoted. it should also not be spoken to those who are averse to listening. And especially not to those who are envious of me. Envious of me means an individual ego who thinks that they are the judge, jury, executioner of this world, which is competing with the Lord. The reason it says this is, so never push this knowledge. Basically, there are only two reasons why you can speak or talk about the Brahman and all of these things. One is if people by choice come to you for that, if people log into knowledge, if people without force are logging in to listen to it, or you're communicating with someone who is devoted and not averse to listening, meaning they are equally enthused and energized by these topics. Those who teach this most confidential knowledge amongst my devotees perform the greatest act of love. They will come to me without doubt. No human being does more loving service to me than they, nor shall there be anyone on this earth more devoted to me. So, Lord, we have covered a lot of ground today. The remaining slokas in this chapter are just going back to Sanjaya, who is observing all of this in the battlefield, communicating it to Dhritarashtra, the king. And Sanjaya says, oh my goodness, what have we just witnessed? We will cover those slokas next week, but we've finished the most vital part of chapter 18 today. We might have hurried a little in the end, but just reflect and ponder over it. There's a lot of hidden gems for us to take over. On that note, have a reflective and a happy week. Spread your life through the knowledge of the self. Talk about it, celebrate it, think about it. Don't debate it. Don't try to explain and make more people interested in the topic. We are the work that we need to do, not in the world out there. So on that note, have a great week. Be in touch and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. Fantastic. Simply fantastic.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya sir.